The Shire, hobbits, wizards, knights, orcs, dwarves, elves. This is the world that Tolkien had captured the imagination of for generations. These books have been super popular and, of course, were transferred into films. As you see right here, Peter Jackson is well known for these said films. So, with this one now being an anime type of film, I wonder if this can work in a different format that we've never seen Lord of the Rings do. We've seen an animated form, but not anime. How can that work? How can that turn out well?
You should be.
What does Mordor want with rings?
The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim is directed by Kenji Kamiyama and a screenplay by Jeffrey Addiss, Will Matthews, Phoebe Gittins, and Arty Papageorgiou, and a story by Jeffrey Addiss, Will Matthews, and Philippa Boyens. The film stars Brian Cox, Gaia Wise, Luke Pasqualino, and Miranda Otto. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, a son attacked by a wolf, a clever and treacherous lord of Rohan, seeking vengeance for the death of his father, forces Helm Hammerhead, the king of Rohan, and his people to make a daring last stand in the ancient stronghold of the Horberg. I have been interested in Tolkien's high fantasy world ever since I was young when I watched Peter Jackson's trilogy of Lord of the Rings films, and then of course I then saw his Hobbit trilogy that was playing in the theaters when they were coming out, and I have enjoyed this series. I have yet to have watched all of The Rings of Power. I know what the internet is going to say about that. I'm still going to watch it regardless of what people are saying, because honestly, a lot of the times people like to exaggerate and BS a lot of the times, and I like to see things for myself. So for the time being, these are my exposure to Lord of the Rings, and I would like to read the books at some point, even though it's going to be a bit of a struggle with me. When I heard about this project, I was interested, but I was also curious about this film. Since this is taking place in Jackson's Middle Earth, this is not like a Rings of Power situation where it is its own thing. It's not set in Peter Jackson's version, is its own type of story that can lead into the book, but really this is more about Jackson's vision and the impact he has had and the effects in which people now associate a lot of the times with Lord of the Rings, and that is his version. Having seen it, I gotta be honest, I actually quite enjoyed it. I'm not gonna sit here and deny that it has its issues or its problems. I'm not defending that at all. It's got problems. But before diving into that, here are the positives that I have. The voice acting is stellar. Everyone in the cast does well with delivering lines with power and command, fitting well into the world of Middle Earth. I think the cast does a good job of knowing when to balance that type of tone and style that is associated with Lord of the Rings and the type of bravado that they give in the film, and I think they do a really good job of conveying that sort of power feeling that the series is well known for with regards to actors when taking on Tolkien's world, and I think all the voice acting all around is very good. The direction is solid. Director Kenji Kamiyama understands and respects Tolkien's work while also having his own voice. It shows his love and passion for this series, and that is good to have with regards to somebody who is, of course, from Japan, who understands how anime works, but also really just understanding Tolkien's world and understanding what makes Lord of the Rings so special to a lot of people and what makes a lot of people still flock and still watch something like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, and maybe not so much The Hobbit, but really just his overall efforts that he had brought to Middle Earth. I think Kenji Kamiyama does a good job of respecting what Peter Jackson did and what Tolkien has done, but still making it his own where it doesn't feel like a copycat of Jackson's work at all. The animation is gorgeous. Every inch of the world of Middle Earth is brought to life with sweeping landscapes, lustrous forests, harsh winters, and beautiful rocky terrains, making for a breathtaking film. I have always appreciated how anime does things with regards to its art design or its style at some points, and this movie is so gorgeous. The look of this feels like something right out of Tolkien's world. The way it's described, the way it looks, the way it feels. All the animation feels fluid. It all feels nice. It all feels vibrant. It all feels really gruff, grizzled, and very lived in a way. And I very much appreciated the amount of detail in some of the clothes that the characters would wear and the detail in the swords and everything. I think it's all well done, and I found myself really admiring the animation style throughout this entire film. The music is amazing. Composer Stephen Gallagher creates a score that throws hints of Howard Shore's work on both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but makes it his own that fits well into the series, bringing us back to Tolkien's world. The score for Lord of the Rings is one of the most iconic in film, or at least in recent history of film, because it brings a sense of courage, bravery, and loyalty that a lot of people still flock to that soundtrack and always get goosebumps every time they listen to it. And for Stephen Gallagher to still kind of recreate that, but not in a way that feels like it is just straight up copy and pasting, but rather little hints and notes, but still making it its own, I think is well done, and it does add a nice soundtrack to the entire series. The action is exciting. Every action sequence feels thrilling and engaging for fans and newcomers to enjoy. Combined with the animation, it all comes together. It's blended so well, it's very visceral, it's very gritty, but it is also very much in the vein of what Tolkien had brought to life with Lord of the Rings with regards to how characters are portrayed as stoic, as brave, and as powerful as it can be. And I appreciate the way it looks through those shots, but just you could even take a picture of this movie and it could feel like a still frame image with regards to the action. And I was very impressed with how well the action add to the excitement factor. The story is interesting. Following Hera and her family defending her home from a warring faction made for a very interesting and very engaging story that I was kind of surprised I was actually finding myself really intrigued by. And it all worked out in the end because, for the most part, this movie doesn't rely so heavily on your knowledge of Lord of the Rings, at least to me. Because, for the most part, you can walk into this and not having watched the other movies. At least that's how I get. But then again, I've watched the movies. But I don't think this is necessarily one where like you have to have watched the movies to understand what's going on. Because for the most part, it does play on its own. It doesn't feel like it relies so heavily on the other films with regards to knowledge that you need to know. I think you can walk into this and still expect a really good time and one that you can find yourself maybe intrigued. Who knows? Some people may not be invested in the story, but I was. The writing is great. Writers Jeffrey Addiss, Will Matthews, Phoebe Gittins, and Arty Papageorgiou pens a script that feels like Jackson's Middle Earth, but also taking details from Tolkien's work, respecting both of their own merits with regards to what Jackson had brought from Tolkien's world and what this movie also tries to bring from Tolkien's world as a whole. I think it blends both together in the way in which characters interact with one another and how the dialogue goes. I think all around the writing does a solid job of still showing why people can get invested in the world of Middle Earth. It's an enjoyable one, but it does have some minor problems that I saw in this movie, so here are now the negatives. The pacing and runtime is long. Scenes take long to get through, and with a runtime of 2 hours and 14 minutes, I honestly think it should have been an hour and 40 minutes. I understand that Tolkien's world, as you can see in front of me, there's extended versions. So yes, there's theatrical and extended versions of this series, and I understand that. You want to fit the criteria of what both of these movies are. At the same time, though, it does get to a point with this story where it does feel like it starts to draw itself out by the end, and once they actually get to what the story of this is supposed to center on, which is Helm's Deep at some point, it does feel like it is drawn out a bit too long to the point of I think it outstays its welcome. So I do think that the runtime and pacing of it all should have been wrapped up much earlier than later. The narration is distracting, though the series isn't stranger to narration. I feel like whenever it does come on, I feel like it stops the film from going at times. It's performed well, don't get me wrong, but I do feel like it's unnecessary. Again, both of Peter Jackson's films do have some narration. They do. But I feel like with this movie, because of how visually telling it is, I just feel like it just kind of stops the film to halt it to just give us exposition. And I just don't think it's necessary, especially when we can see it. It's not like we don't know what's going on. we can see it. I feel like with these movies, I think they'll explain some things, but they won't go in depth with a narration that much. Whereas to this movie, they kind of stop to explain things, which we don't really need to see. I feel like they could have just said something or just had a quick scene and just be done with it. The fan service moments feel tagged on. I might let Sauron's presence in the movie go with regards to it setting up into the Lord of the Rings with regards to what happens in Jackson's Middle Earth, or at the very least in the Lord of the Rings series. But the other moments didn't need to be there, and what I'm mostly talking about, and I'll give you a hint, it involves two famous characters that are well known in this series. That I won't say who or what. All I'll just say is I do feel like their presence or their name drop does feel like, oh, you have to lead into The Hobbit, or at the very least, The Lord of the Rings, to set this up. When I don't think it needed to. I just feel like it was unnecessary to have them, but again, I think it was just there so that way fans could just be excited knowing that it all connects together in some way, but I just don't think it needed to. A good addition to the series. This is one time I actually kind of disagree with critics, because critics actually aren't impressed with this movie, which I'm kind of surprised by. But I'm not like hating what they're saying. Some people think it's unnecessary. I just think it was a good time, and I really enjoyed this. I may have some problems, but overall, it's a good one. I didn't mind this movie at all. I'm not saying that it's better than the Lord of the Rings movies. It might be a little better with some of the Hobbit movies, but for the most part, I didn't find myself hating this movie. I actually had a good time. I am going to give The Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim a 7 out of 10. I had a fun time. I enjoyed myself, especially for an anime film that I got to see in the theaters. I thought that was pretty cool. Overall, if you get a chance to see it, if you're a huge Lord of the Rings fan, you might like it, but if you just want a good anime movie, I recommend this one. So now we'll be doing the Sonic movies leading up to Sonic 3. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.